There's a story told of a little boy who used to escape his bedroom after being punished. He'd crawl out of his bedroom window down an old fruit tree to the ground. One day his father told him that he was going to chop the fruit tree down because it hadn't produced any fruit for a number of years. That evening, the boy and his friend bought a bag of apples and during the night tied those apples to the barren branches. The next morning, the boy's father couldn't believe his eyes. He said to his wife, "Honey, I just can't believe it. That old tree hasn't produced any fruit for years and now it's covered with apples. And the most amazing thing is it's a pear tree." Now, I had a whole lot of other things that I was going to say this morning, but it was mentioned to me after the 8 o'clock service that I hadn't talked about compost. I thought, well, it's not something I normally talk about from up here. But on further reflection, I felt that the person who told me was quite right. Because oftentimes, it's what we put around our trees and how we treat our trees that makes such a huge difference to what they produce. And when you think about what compost is, it's essentially all those bits out of our garden that we didn't want or need. The bits that we took off because they were surplus to requirements. They weren't part of the fruit or the vegetables or the tree that we actually needed. And the words that God gives us this morning in our gospel are all about trimming off what's not needed and helping the vine or the tree to produce better fruit going forward. And when we stop and we look at life, we see that there's a whole lot of things that happen to us in life that cause us pain or hurt or disappointment or despair. And we realise that we're actually called to shed those because God will come along and he'll prune those parts of our life off us. Yes, they're there, but there isn't a tree around that hasn't had a bad branch or some leaf mould or something that's happened to it. And so those get pruned off and just dropped at the base of the tree. And even in a forest, you can see the bits that naturally drop off, they fall at the bottom of the tree. And those are the bits that then break down. And for us, that breaking down or that composting is all about taking all the different lessons that we come across in life, all those pains and those hurts and those discomforts, and we use them to shape and to mould who we are so that we can share our experiences with others. And hopefully, in the sharing of those experiences, we begin to share who we are. Because in sharing who we are, we interpret for others how we see life. And if our life is based in God, if our life is based in our faith, then sharing who we are is sharing God, because we are God's representatives here in this place. And so if I take all those things that have moulded and shaped me in my life, from a godmother who, without hesitation, shared her faith with me every step of the way, and hoped through my teenage years that I might one day want to come back to God, I did. To experiences in work, where I've worked with people who set out to hurt me, or to bully me, or to make me feel small or incompetent. And that challenges me. That challenges all of us when someone sets out to do that to us. And yet God's doing all of that for a reason. Because now I can look back on that, now that I'm past that, I can look back on it and I can say, but that made me a stronger person. Because all of a sudden I realised that I didn't have just me to rely on. I couldn't rely on just me. I had to rely on a whole bunch of other people and my faith to get me through. And like making up compost, it's not just made up of all the apple peelings I've got, of all those kind people that have given me bags of apples. It's made up of the cabbage leaves and the parsnip tops and the carrot greens and everything else that go into it. And that all knits together to form something that is rich and nourishing. And when I take that compost and I put it back into the garden, I get new growth. I get fresh growth. I get growth that bears fruit. So now, as I look at my life, I can take all those different things that have hurt me and challenged me, and I've processed them into something. And I can now use them to take the opportunities that I get, like Philip in our first reading this morning. Philip was sitting there and he sees this guy sitting on the back of his chariot, reading from Isaiah. Now it says he was reading from the book of Isaiah. I imagine it was a scroll. So he's sort of sitting there with it on a scroll and he's reading through it. And Philip feels the voice of the Lord say to him, go and spend some time near that guy. He didn't say go and evangelize to him, or go and teach him what he's doing wrong, or chastise him, or even tell him to come to church. He said, go and spend some time with him. And so Philip goes across, and this guy says the most odd question. I'm trying to read Isaiah, but I don't understand it. Can you interpret it for me? And Philip says, yes. Yes, I can. And he takes that opportunity. And what comes out of that? This Ethiopian guy, who's hugely important in the scheme of Ethiopian politics, says to Philip, now you can baptize me in any piece of water, can't you? Based on what we've just read. And Philip says, yes. Yes, I can. So Philip took that small opportunity to really let God create fruit within him. And he baptized the Ethiopian then and there. And I think that gives each of us confidence this morning to be able to know that God has given us in our own way, and we're all unique, we will all do it differently, but he's given us the confidence in our own way to be able to say, yes, I can interpret that for you, or yes, I can hear the voice of God telling me to get alongside that person. I don't need to invite them to church because that could be a scary thing. I don't need to evangelize to them because I might not be that confident at that sort of thing. But all I'm called to do is to be alongside them. Because by being alongside them, I might make a small step in their journey to finding Christ. And that is where we bear fruit. Amen.